Good evening, Comic Avengers. Thank you very much for assembling here today. That Comic Gal here, and I am making my very first video. Assuming anyone bothers to click on this, I can only guess that you are someone either wanting to avenge the characters, the industry, and the hobby that you love, or you are here to avenge SJW Marvel for the terrible bigotry I am sure to unleash upon it. However, whichever you are here to avenge, you are avenging something. You stand for something and have something you believe in, so good for you. I'm proud of you. However, as with all beliefs, shoving your beliefs onto others or putting down those with other beliefs is not nice, and it's not welcome here. So I want to start this by saying I do not at all condone the bullying or harassment of others, even those of differing views, no matter how stupid you find the views of the offending person or how cruel they are to others. We are Avengers here, not Revengers. Revenge is not what heroes stand for. Revenge is an anti-hero or even villain thing, and I am of the belief that everyone here is better than that. I believe everyone has the potential to be a hero. Now, these beliefs of mine were taught to me through my parents, who are wonderful people who I love very dearly, but also some of the movies I watched growing up, my own faith, and, well, comics. Comics had a huge part of my childhood, and since this is my first channel this is my first video I am making on this channel, I want to start it here. I want to start it with where my love of comics began for me, with my story, where I come from, and just how much it's impacted me. If you didn't notice from my voice, I am female. I am young, in my early 20s, in fact, and I am mixed race. My mother is Puerto Rican, and my father is a mix of all things white. I'm the kind of person SJW Marvel is trying to appeal to. And you know what? SJW Marvel actually chased me away from comics. The medium I grew up with, the medium I've loved for years, it did the exact opposite of what it intended. So I sit here today in my closet, no joke intended, to tell the internet why, whether or not anyone on the internet bothers to listen. I'm a small person. I'm a weak person. Up until my last 2 years of high school, I was bullied. I was, and am sometimes, awkward and a bit socially inept. By the time I hit middle school, the bullying had escalated to a nightmarish point. I actually remember crying in the morning when I had to get up for school, because I woke up. I didn't want to. School was a nightmare for me. Still, I smiled. I told all my teachers good morning. I bore it. I tried to be strong, no matter what happened. And you know why? I grew up with heroes who struggled, just as I did. I grew up with heroes who overcame their struggles. Heroes who lost battles, friends, family, limbs, and their own mental well-being during fights with evil. But they got back up anyway and kept fighting anyway. Itty bitty me with few, if any, friends. Even before I learned to read, I was picking up comics. I was sitting cross-legged with a comic in my lap on the floor of comic stores, bookstores, libraries, the mall, anywhere I could find them. Really, my family rarely had the money to buy them. I get like maybe a few on Christmas, maybe one on my birthday, maybe a few from the $1 bin that weren't that good, but I had a comic and I'd be so excited about it, even if it was terrible. Marvel's comics were my favorite. Their characters felt more in reach, more human, more like me. Captain America, Spider-Man, the X-Men, they were my favorites because they were like friends to me. People more like me. People who were bullied or looked down on for being weak, for being small, for being different. They weren't all female. None of them were even Hispanic, but I could relate to them. They felt like me. They felt like friends. Even as I grew, they continued to be relatable. And eventually, when middle school rolled around, and even when I was well into mangas too at the time, I went back to Marvel. I went back to my old friends. I could open up any book with these characters on them and know it was them. Just like reconnecting with an old friend, you know? There's that click. You two fit back together right away, and you feel like you were never apart. Comic books are about escapism and inspiration and admiration. I could escape in those books, and at the time, get a recharge before I went back to my daily life, to my own struggles. They inspired me to keep trying, to keep going, to keep smiling, and no matter how bad things got, I did. I could, and I did. Then one day, roughly 6, 7 years ago, I opened a Spider Man comic, and I didn't know the people in it anymore. Suddenly, my friend, Peter Parker I grew up with, was dead. And Miles Morales was suddenly set up as a replacement for the Peter Parker I knew. And even though Miles Morales is Puerto Rican, he's not half black, actually. He's just a darker skinned Puerto Rican. We come in all sorts of colors, anywhere from pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, to darker skin. It's because everyone is some mixture of African American, some mix of African slave, Taino Indian, or Spaniard. So there's all sorts of coloring, and it doesn't matter what color you are, you're still Puerto Rican. I don't know why people try to specify black Puerto Rican or say he's half black. Neither of those are accurate to our culture. But still, even though he was technically of the same race and culture as me, he wasn't mine. He was not relatable. It felt like that moment where your best friend was a shoo-in for the lead in a school musical, you know? And clearly, they're the most talented one there, with the best voice, perfectly on key every single time. They have every single line down pat. They've been the lead in so many other plays, but suddenly some freshman, who's mediocre at best, is chosen for the part instead. Not because they're better at everything, not because they have skills or talent, or they play the character in a better way, but because they're a different skin color, and that's the race that the person directing feels the character should be. Your incredibly talented and beloved friend who worked so hard, who helped you practice the part for weeks. No, who you helped practice the part for weeks before the rehearsal, who has every word of script memorized, is reduced to the understudy role, overlooked for something they had no control over. It hurt like that, and left me that confused. But surely things would go back quickly, right? This had to be some sort of short one off. That's not what happened. And in 2012, just under a year later, they did the same thing to Captain America, another one of the characters I love dearly. They replaced him with the Falcon at that time. In 2013, it was Thor who was replaced, and while he wasn't as dear a character to me, he was still one of the ones I grew up with. And yeah, I loved the design for female Thor. Okay? It was super cool. It was unique. The art for the comic was really cool too, and I'm always happy to see strong female characters and just well written female characters, but that's the thing, she wasn't as well written as she could be, since the agenda in that comic brought down the rest of the writing, dumbed it down. She could have been actually really cool if done right, but they didn't. The whole thing with all these characters I grew up with suddenly being replaced, all these friends of mine that I grew up with being replaced, it left me with a sick feeling, like something was terribly wrong, but I didn't have the words to describe it. Other than it felt like my friends had been taken away from me. But things got taken away and you don't know why. Why did you take away something that mattered so much to me? I remember when I gave up on the Marvel comics. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the comics section, just like I was when I was a little girl, comic in my lap. But instead of being given an escape, instead of being inspired, I felt abandoned and sick, confused. I put that comic down and left the store. Over the years that followed, I picked up reprints of old Excalibur. Megan is my very, very dear. Megan is bae. That's just it in general. X-Men, Avengers, Exiles, but I didn't pick up a single newer Marvel comic. I still read manga. I still read DC, the occasional comics from other companies. Empowered, for example, is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, to be perfectly honest. But my favorite company's comics no longer feel or felt welcoming. Sure, I've loved pretty much every movie they've made. Well, I'm iffy on Homecoming. And the newer Thor and the second Guardians of the Galaxy felt like they had a lot of forced, out of place humor at times. And the newer Fantastic Four movie I didn't even bother watching. But still, when you have a character who is so beloved, has so much history behind them, and many, many years of story and development, and multiple generations of people who care about them, who've worked hard on them, you should never treat them like that, like they aren't good enough, just because of the color of their skin, or their gender, or their sexuality, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. A terrible example would be, for example, Runaways. Another series I loved when I was younger with a diverse, well-written cast. They relaunched it, doing an additional run of it that they did stop shortly, but for a while it was messy. Molly was the only character from the original series, and she was drawn to look like an ugly little gremlin. Jubilee was in it, and for some reason, bisexual, which I don't remember her ever being in any X-Men comic I've ever read, and Cloak and Dagger, who are also very dear characters to me, and are lovers or dating in some comics. Were not only made siblings, which makes things really weird, but somehow switched names. For example, Cloak was Dagger and Dagger was Cloak all of a sudden. Tandy was Cloak, and they made Tyrone Dagger. But they kept the same colors, so the, the black guy, the black sibling, Dagger Tyrone, still wore black, and the white sibling, who I guess now is an albino African American, bags under her eyes that made her look like she was a drug user, which is actually like the opposite of Cloak and Dagger's whole thing was like anti-drugs. It's laughable, to be perfectly frank. But Tandy, who was cloaked now for some reason, still wore white. Poor girl looked like she hadn't slept in years. Um, They wouldn't even call Tyrone's powers as coming from dark energy, because I guess dark energy sounds more racist than having a black kid whose costume is now just a hoodie with tattoos, who got his powers from drugs, go around stabbing people with black daggers. Calling it dark energy would be too racist. And that's not even all. For some reason, Pixie was there too, and also bisexual for some reason. And apparently was Jubilee's ex-girlfriend, but they were still friends for more reasons. Oh well, I didn't really read much of that series after the first few books proved to themselves to be complete crap. But I'm pretty sure they killed off Pixie pretty early in the run, just to give Jubilee a better reason to rebel against people. Because, putting women in fridges is A-okay as long as the main character isn't a guy. Am I right? Things still got worse. It somehow managed to get worse. Secret Empire came out. As I mentioned before, Captain America was one of my absolute favorite characters ever growing up. Then Secret Empire came out. I never had the heart to read those. But the day I ran into those pictures and found articles about it online, I honestly got teary-eyed. It wasn't enough to tell a character I loved that the color of their skin made them not good enough. It wasn't enough to strip him of his identity and purpose and give it to someone else. No, they had to render every single Captain America comic I read as a kid. Every single comic that gave me hope, that gave me an escape, that helped me be strong, that made me smile, that made me laugh when things were difficult for me. And they rendered every single one of them null and void. He was never a hero. He was working for Hydra the whole time, and they made it very clear that that was the real Captain America. He turned a good man, a wholesome, admirable man who fought hard for what he believed in, who worked hard to prove himself. A small, weak person who became strong. They turned him into a villain. Not just by corruption or possession, or even via a slow and steady journey into insanity, but that he'd been one the whole time. That was it. That was my breaking point. My dad was watching diversity in comics, and sometimes I'd watch with him. Before long, I was watching on my own time. Through DNC, I started watching Nurkish, Ethan Van Sciver, Just Some Guy, Mim, Mim Headroom. Am I even pronouncing that right? I found people who were as hurt and felt as betrayed as I was. But you know what else I found? I found hope again. Hope that this medium that we all love can become strong again. And with Jawbreaker's Indiegogo becoming such a success, I had even more hope. Only for it to get dashed with the recent events of everyone just basically going crazy and Antarctic Press having to cancel the book. It's nonsense. So, dear Marvel writers, artists, editors, all of you, inkers and colorists too, I don't care about your skin color, your culture, your gender, or sexuality. All I ask is that you make good comics. That you make stories I can get lost in. That you draw art I can believe in, and that characters feel like friends again. Give the characters struggles. Don't be afraid to kill people off, to hurt them, to make them earn respect, to have them work hard for appreciation. Make them feel human. Don't turn a medium that is an escape for people into someplace they don't feel welcome. Somewhere there's another kid getting horribly bullied who needs a hero. Give them a hero. Give them someone who gives them the courage to get up in the morning and face another day. Give them an adventure. Give them fun. Don't give us your stories. Give us theirs. Do these heroes, old and new, justice. We are not asking for all characters to be straight white men. We are asking that they be done well. We are asking that they be more than a skin color, more than a gender, more than a sexuality. We are concerned customers who love comics, who love these characters and this medium. Don't use people's race, gender, and sexuality as an excuse to brush off what they say. You can't say feelings are important and then neglect the feelings of others just because their feelings don't match yours. You can't be against bullying and then rejoice and gloat when you make others upset, feel hurt, or chase them off social media or even out of the comics industry, or refuse to allow their books to be published. I heard John Malin talking about what happened with Yellow Flash. I watched that entire interview slash live stream or whatever. Marvel, people of Marvel, he spoke with such an earnest love and passion for comics, with such a clear and defined hurt and pain in his voice. This industry he loves so much and has loved for so long that he worked so hard to become a part of, has told him he is not welcome. Not because he mistreated anybody, not because he hurt anybody or broke any rules, simply because he cares about his fans regardless of their political stances. How dare you hurt a good man like that? How dare you hurt so many fans and then shove them away, ignore them, block them, and even make fun of them across social media? I find comfort in that I am not alone in this. Ironically, this community I found through DNC is a new escape, full of new friends. But as a grown woman, I want you to get better again, Marvel. I want you to make new, amazing stories that my kids can read. I want you to make classics. I believe you can be better than you are right now. I believe even you can still be a hero. And that's all. Hopefully, this gets at least a few people thinking. Thanks for listening. That Comic Girl out. You'll have a lovely night. Hey guys, after editing this together, I have realized that my timeline is a bit off. While I'd say that I mentioned it first, primarily because Peter Parker being replaced by Miles Morales as Spider-Man probably was one of the most, it was the most impactful of the three I first mentioned. However, while Peter Parker did die
in the 2011 issue where Miles Morales is first introduced. He did not officially replace Peter Parker as Spider-Man until 2013-2014. Which would have been after Lady Thor. Sorry about any confusion that has been taking place. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.